Isaiah, what's up?
So, regarding the transcendental argument, what is the contradiction if you take God out of the equation? So, let's say you presuppose all the transcendental categories except for God. What's the contradiction?
What actually works to make the transcendental categories coherent, work together, and what grounds them?
Okay, I get that, but when you tell me that, I take that to be the conclusion, right? So I'm asking, like, what is the either contradiction or absurdity to get you to that conclusion?
Well, the contradiction comes in when you compare it to the other worldview. There's not a contradiction in my argument. My argument is that only the Christian God and Christian metaphysics and epistemology and revelation could tell us the means by which the transcendental categories are grounded, namely in the personal God of Christian Trinitarian theism. So there's no contradiction in that, because that's my position, contrasted to the opposing worldview, which is wrought with contradictions. That's the argument. People think that the argument, they don't understand that it's comparing two paradigms. That's what the argument is.
Okay, no, I get it. That's exactly what I wanted to ask you. So just to clarify, let's say that just a guess. I'm sure there's more, but let's say that the maximum there would be is like 30 paradigms, right? There's probably many more. There's probably hundreds, but at the end of the day, you're saying that when you investigate each one on their own merits, right, that the only one that stands on its feet is the God one. But
the God one. I mean, I don't even know what that means.
The Orthodox Christian worldview. That's what I mean.
Yeah, okay. I mean, can you give me another worldview that gives an account for universals, the one and the many, the past, the self, the trans?
No, I can't. I can't do that. No, I can't. I mean, I'm still. The reason I came on here to ask that is because I'm trying to. I think I'm to the point to where I'm convinced that at least a good way to put it would be I'm unconvinced that atheism can account for those things, but I'm to a point where I'm not convinced that the Orthodox Christian worldview or really the Christian worldview can account for knowledge. Like when you talk about revelation and even grounding, like with the last guy, I don't think I fully understand what that entails.
So revelation is the totality of what God has disclosed about himself and the world to us in scripture and tradition. Okay, that's the basis for how we know God and what our paradigm is of the world. It is not the totality of our knowledge. It is not itself the means of knowing the world per se, because I have senses, I have sense data that I go out and learn. I learn from other people. It's not the only means of knowledge. It's the paradigm which gives an account for the preconditions of how knowledge is possible. So think about it like there's layers. There's my day-to-day knowledge that I get from living out in the world and reading and talking to people and this and that and thinking, and those propositions and things that I think and learn and know are only possible with another set of things that have to be the case. The transcendental categories are preconditions of knowledge, but those things don't make any sense to cohere and work together on their own. I can't just say that they are and just assume that those things are the case without asking the question, well, where do they come from? How are they? What are they? Where are they? What grounds them? Grounding means, in justification, giving an account for justified true belief, an explanation for, a basis for that thing.
Okay, no, that was great. That cleared it up. I mean, I think this is my last question, maybe. So when you say that we receive revelation through our senses.
No, I said we receive knowledge through our senses. Revelation is what God gave to the church and to the prophets. That's divine revelation, the totality of the system of theology of Christian revelation committed to the apostles and the prophets. That's divine revelation. What I get on day-to-day living is knowledge, empirical sense data, information. That's not divine revelation.
Yes. Okay. But so then maybe I'm confused, because when you're telling me that it's going to, it's what God revealed to the prophets, right? Don't we learn about that through our senses?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they're equivalent.
They're not equivalent. No, they're not equivalent. That's where I was going with my question. I'm not saying that revelation is our senses. They're totally different things. But I'm saying that if we receive that revelation through our senses, or we learn about that revelation through our senses, but our senses are fallible, wouldn't that undermine revelation?
No, because I don't have to have infallibility. I don't have to possess infallibility to come to a reasonable degree of certitude as a human being, or to have warranted belief, even in my sense data. So, no, it does not require me having infallibility to possess the highest degree of certitude.
Okay, I mean, wouldn't that be assuming that your senses are reliable enough?
Yeah, that's one of the presuppositions that I have as a Christian. And the reason that I believe my senses are reliable is because God made a world wherein my senses are able to pick up data from the external world. I'm made in the image of God, and so in the Christian worldview, it makes sense that I can gain information and data from my senses. In the atheist worldview, there's no explanation for that. It makes no sense.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I agree there in that comparison. But I want to dig a little deeper there then. If, let's say that you have someone who's just totally schizophrenic, like a paranoid schizophrenic, right? How would, in the Christian worldview, what would be the justification, or what would be the explanation of being able to tell whose senses are reliable and not? You know, I mean, because from the outside in on both ends, they both think each other's crazy. So in the Christian worldview, how do you know whose senses are reliable? Because it could be the case that that small percentage of unreliability of your senses, you could just be completely whacked out.
Adopting that position would actually lead to the impossibility of having knowledge at all. And I don't think that anybody believes or thinks that you can have this sort of absolutely indubitable certitude that Descartes was looking for. It just doesn't exist, except what Descartes' looking for is actually what God has and what God possesses. So my argument is not that I possess the totality of knowledge or infallibility. It's that I believe in a divine being who does have those characteristics, and because I'm made in his image, I'm able to reason about the world in a pale, reflected way, even though I don't possess the totality of knowledge or omniscience. So omniscience, I would say, is necessary for grounding knowledge, but it doesn't mean that I possess the omniscience, because I'm grounding the knowledge in the divine mind and God who possesses omniscience. So, no, it's just simply not the case that because some people are schizophrenic, that therefore possibly all people are schizophrenic and all of our knowledge is false. That would be self-defeating. It would make knowledge impossible to have that position.
Okay. I think I'll need to think a little deeper on that. I think that was a good explanation. I hear you, but I think I'm still having trouble with understanding what is the thing that you are using to know that your senses are reliable when they are.
Again, the assumption that God created, it's a presupposition I have, that God created a world.
Wouldn't a schizophrenic have that same?
I guess they could have faith in God, because some of them are pretty well-functioning individuals.
Yeah, a lot of them are. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like let's say that you have a schizophrenic who is a Orthodox Christian, right? And so I'm just
first of all, this would be a test case scenario. So you're taking a test case and you're sort of universalizing and saying maybe we're all schizophrenic.
No, I don't want to. I mean, I guess maybe I am saying that, but I don't want to put it that way. I think that it's more like I'm just trying to find what justification do I have to say that my senses are reliable when in fact they are, and when they're not, right? It seems like I have to step outside of my senses in order to justify that.
Yeah, right? It's a transcendental category presupposition that, yeah, generally speaking, the senses are reliable, but not infallible. But so what? Why does having knowledge require in every case infallibility? I don't think it does.
I think that the only trouble I'm having there is and the reason why I brought up a schizophrenic is because let's say they assume that their senses are reliable, But just because they're assuming their senses are reliable doesn't mean they actually
No,
are.
it's not just the assumption. Also, there would be mountains of data and evidence that attest to the reliability. So, for example, do I believe that my wife is a real wife, or have I been hallucinating her all these years? Well, there's quite a bit of corroborating information that would help me to have a reasonable belief that she's a real person and not a fiction in my mind.
We're all going to make assumptions. So I think what you're confusing, so knowledge, there's three conditions.
We can't hear you. You have to speak into the microphone.
I think you're confusing a couple issues. And with knowledge, there's what we call three conditions: a belief condition, a truth condition, and a justification condition. One of the problems that I've been seeing is that people collapse the justification and truth condition. Okay. So the big difference is, what's the difference between the schizophrenic and us? Well, we both have a belief condition, correct?
Yes.
What's important is the truth condition. So the truth condition, you don't have to know that the truth condition is true. I think that's what you're getting caught up on. All it has to, in epistemology, is the truth condition is true. So the big difference is, why is the schizophrenic not justified and the persons whose senses are fairly reliable justified? Is because it satisfies the truth condition with the normal person and not the... It's not truth. Schizophrenia is not truth conducive. Does that make sense?
No, that makes complete sense, and I think that this is honing in. We're getting really close to maybe where my confusion is that I don't know how either of them could actually come to the truth of knowing that their senses are reliable, because they both have the assumption that their senses are reliable.
Yeah, you don't need to know that they're reliable. All it has to do is be reliable. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, I didn't think of it that way.
You're confusing the justification of how would I justify and know that that's reliable. It's like, well, you don't need to. That's the great thing about JTB and knowledge. You have to believe that it's reliable. You have to formulate that in a warranted way. And if it is reliable, then it satisfies the truth conditions. And that's why the schizophrenic wouldn't be justified and wouldn't have knowledge, and we would.
Okay.
I appreciate that question.
You don't have to verify and prove that the senses are reliable, because then you're collapsing the justification condition and the truth condition. It's like, you don't have to know, because you'll see where the problem's going. Then you'd have to know that you know that you know, or
infinite regress, yeah.
In order to confirm the truth condition. That's exactly what a truth condition is. Let me give you an example. You have a belief. You formulate the belief in a correct way. It's knowledge if what you're believing is actually true. And people always want to go, but how do you know that it's actually true? Well, that's to ignore what the truth condition. You don't have to. Truth condition is, it simply has to be true. So part of this problem is caused by Descartes, in which case, if you do have that type of criteria for knowledge, nobody knows anything.
Right.
Not even in the statements that you're actually making. There's hardly anybody in the world that holds that level of that high of standard that you have to infallibly confirm the truth condition. Everybody's abandoned that because they realize how ridiculous that. It's circular, it goes on infinite ingress, and it collapses the category. You're mixing the categories between knowing and what a truth condition is. Truth condition, you do not have to know that it's true. It simply has to be true.
That's really good, by the way. I appreciate that.